I'm Max Beasley, and you're listening to the 5D Podcast.
This is Andrew Berkeley, and you're listening to the 5D Podcast.
Hey, this is Level Up Leroy, and you're listening to the 5D Podcast.
Get yourself ready for an interdimensional sensory experience. Welcome all to the dimension of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. This is the 5D Podcast.
Hello there and welcome to the 5D Podcast, brought to you by Stuart and Zach from 5D-blog.com. Welcome to those of you listening live on Twitch. Also, welcome to those of you listening on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn and Stitcher. Be sure to check out the 5D-blog.com website for blog articles, competitions and news. And of course, check out the 5D YouTube channel, the details of which can be found on the 5D website. So, basically, we're delighted at the 5D Pop Culture website to be talking with Craig Schaffer. It's Schaffer, not Schaffer, isn't it? Craig Schaffer from Crowbar Creative, one of the creators behind the wonderfully named Monty Python's Curricular Medieval Reenactment program, or RPG, whichever way you want to go with it. It's a
role-playing game.
It's a role-playing. It's not a role-playing game. It must have been a crazy few weeks. It must have been a crazy few weeks with since the Kickstarter went live, because I mean, let's face it, it's not exactly a struggle to do well. As I mean, the last I looked, I don't know if you've been looking. If it was me, I can be looking probably every minute. But the last I looked, the original goal was £168,954. And the last I looked, about an hour ago, it was at 1,416,101. So, you know, it's only just met the target.
Yeah, about 6 times.
Yeah. I mean, it's maybe a silly question. Maybe you're expecting to do well. But has it taken you by surprise in terms of the level of interest? Well, it's 13,000 backers as well. So, you know.
That's right. It's true. It was a surprise, although we didn't know what to expect at all.
Yeah.
It could have been as successful as it seems to have been for gamers and Python fans reunited. It could have been, completely disappointing as well. We had really no idea what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But we're glad that this many people want to give it a shot. So.
Well, I mean, I'll ask you about the game specifically yourself in just a few moments, because I'm really interested in terms of your background as well. Because obviously, we'll talk Python in a minute. Tell us about your RPG background, because obviously this is not an RPG game, as you said. But tell us about your RPG.
Established that.
I know, right? Tell us about your background then. I mean, I started off myself D&D back in the 80s, dabbling in that. Were you the same sort of?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Started in the 80s, in high school with the nerds and the members of the band. And at the same time was also discovering Monty Python at the time. Not that they were at all combined at that time.
No.
Except, of course, Holy Grail quotes kept turning up in the game, as I think is, pretty much standard fare for just about everybody who's played since then.
Yeah, so, yeah. And back in those days as well, it's not like it is today, where it's kind of cool it's a badge of honor, isn't it, to be a nerd now, I guess. But back in those days, personally, I kind of like hid it away, with. I mean, I was such a saddo. I was either my sort of prog rock records and stuff, that I had at the time, and D&D. I was like the epitome of the the embarrassed nerd sort of thing. Whereas these days, it's different, isn't it? It's huge
Yeah.
explosion.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Why do you think it's?
Yeah.
Why do you think it's exploded?
All-
Sorry, go on. I apologise.
I was
Talking
going to
over
say,
you.
it just looks like all the cool people woke up and started delving into one another's imagination.
Yeah.
This fantastic vehicle that is D&D and role-playing games. Such a fantastic way to just explore your imagination and kind of do improvisational theater together.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, I'm not a great actor type person, but even I can let myself go a wee bit when we're doing, that sort of thing. I mean, my interests have branched off. D&D I still love, but things like Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest, and I also want to talk, if we do have time, about Rack and Veil, because I hadn't played that. I was and I know you guys have been responsible for that, and that is Arthur Rackham is again one of my childhood loves, which in terms of the art that he did. But we'll talk about that if we've got time. So in terms of, why do you think it's actually exploded in the last few? Well, it feels like in the last few years, the whole role playing thing. Do you think it's like the likes of Stranger Things TV, or what?
Right.
What do you think it is?
That's right. Yeah, and I think there was another appearance in a movie. There was I can't remember the actor's name, but he was rather well known, and I think that kind of sparked an interest in his circle, his immediate circle.
Yeah.
But it was also very publicized, and people started checking it out and getting hooked.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is what I call the natural reaction.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you've got the likes now of who's the guy that plays Superman and The Witcher, or Henry Cavill, who's a big nerd and plays all the role-playing games and stuff. So, I've never been cool in my life, but at least I'm kind of almost with the cool kids now these days. Maybe not quite, neither there.
Right.
Tell me about your love of Python just for a few minutes, then, because I've always been really fascinated by it. I mean, I've loved Python. I was too young to watch the series the first time, but it's when Holy Grail first came out, I think, mid-70s would be, late 70s. And then I discovered Life of Brian, and now something completely different. Then I went back and saw the series once it was reshown again on British TV. But I've often wondered why and how it's taken off like it has done in the US, because it is quintessentially British in many ways, and yet it seems to have, I don't know, America loves it. They sold out, what was it, massive stadiums when they've done the live show. So, why with you in the US, do you think?
Well, I credit my father, who has a very strange sense of humor. And in the late '70s, so we would watch Python together, and I was quite, mind blown by the limits that were passed.
Yeah, yeah.
That it was possible to do that, just in an intellectual sense, as well as its comedic, weight. But that just that was possible to do, to go that far.
Yeah.
It was actually kind of a motto that stuck with me. I was always told that I had gone too far, so I probably put that on my tombstone.
Yeah.
In the end, going too far has been, a strength.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I didn't watch it with my father. My father had very much more of a kind of I don't know, kind of stand-up comedian type background in the humour that he loved. He never got Python. I did try getting him into it, and he just I would be there just rolling around, crying with laughter or whatever it would be, sing along to the songs, and he would be there going, this is rubbish.
Too silly.
Yeah, he would say he would say that this is not, they're just silly boys playing. Well, I think that's probably the part of the point, is that kind of silliness. So that stayed with you through the years, then, that love, and
It really did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, in high school, I was the guy who would do Python sketches during class, doing the class clown thing. And it just became kind of a little cult thing that people, if you could. And then when the films came out, people were like, okay, it's not just you, it's not just Craig.
Yeah, it's not. I can remember once a friend of mine who shared the same love, John, is a friend of mine, John, my best friend John at school. Both of us would do the trade-in quotes and stuff like that, and to the annoyance of everybody. It used to be so annoying. I must admit, I watched this. I think was it the first series not so long ago, and it struck me how actually not all of it I kind of really loved again. I think a lot of it has aged pretty well, especially the classic stuff. But there's quite a lot I watched. I thought, maybe some things maybe haven't. I don't know.
It's just an access into a strange world, and some of it's funny, but a lot of it is just absurd. And
yeah.
And what makes us laugh is what was so strange about the twists and turns that the sketches would take.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was inherently, slapstick and pies in the face. It was just what made us laugh was how weird and how far.
Yeah, and also how clever it was. I mean, obviously the guys, most of them, I think all of them except maybe Eric Idle had a kind of a university background, but I teach in my day job. I teach kind of psychology and philosophy. So I use the argument sketch, the Michael Palin, John Cleese, isn't it? I think where they talk about, and I think Palin actually gives a really good definition of what a philosophical argument is. And it's really clever stuff.
It's very rich.
It's really good. I mean, sadly, a lot of my students, when I show it to them, I've never heard of Python, so it is my kind of like, my intention to keep it alive.
Yeah, right.
Keep it alive. So why then putting the two together? Because again, and I don't want to offend you in any way, but when I first heard about the Python and this role playing game, or the extra, I keep calling it the extracurricular, which is not right, is it? The Monty Python's Curricular Medieval Reenactment program. Why? How did you put the two together in terms of Python and the game? I mean, it doesn't sound as if it should work, and I don't mean that in a rude way, but you
right.
tell me.
Right. Well, actually, my brother Brian Saliba at Crowbar Creative. Actually, I mean, we kind of enjoyed both of these worlds without necessarily associating them, except, as we well know, at the end of sessions, which always end up just bantering and with British accents, which especially for Americans is so fun. It's kind of silly, but But at one point, Brian was after Rackham Vale. Brian was looking for another project, and he was working with a licensing company that was mostly involved in rock bands.
Right.
But in the list of things that might be possible, there was Monty Python, and Brian called them up and said, Monty Python? Is this possible? And he was kind of having chills, going up and down and going, wait a minute, this could be amazing. It's really fun. So after 2 years of back and forth and long silences and we'll get back to you kind of stuff, there was some personnel changes, and someone actually got back to Brian saying, Python is actually very easy to work with. They're looking for ways to get themselves out there. Terry Gilliam's daughter takes care of all their merchandising, so she was apparently key in finally getting this on the work table. And Brian and I had written quite a bit of material. It was pretty easy to get inspired. We had tons of material already. And pretty much everything got approved, which was really even stuff that was kind of risky on our part, saying we're gonna get some juice out of this thing, and even change things and recombine things that weren't in sketches or movies together, things together, and everything was approved. They liked. I think they knew that. I think they'd feel that Brian and I both had been Python fans for ages,
right?
And that there was something just organic from us. It was not just an easy. Well, let's see what we can get a hold of.
Yeah.
Something that's really close to our hearts and has been for so long.
That seems to come across as well, because when Exalted Funeral got in touch with us, basically say, look, Kickstarter's coming up for this this project. Would you like to just stick some stuff on the website? I thought, well, I need to read about it first, and that does seem to come across the fact that it does seem. I'm not an entitled fan of Python. We get many kind of fandom these days that have this entitled, I grew up with this, so therefore I own it. None of that nonsense. But I still did think, do these guys have a real love for it? And that does seem to come across in the stuff that I've read that you guys have put together on the Kickstarter page, and when I've read some of the other stuff and what you've been talking now, that kind of love, dare I say, obsession with Python seems to kind of like shine through.
Yeah, it's really taken root in our lives, in our psyche, and we feel, we dare to feel ourselves legitimate to represent this, and there will be critics, but they're probably missing something.
Well, I mean, 13,000 people have backed it, and as I say, smash the Kickstarter things, which has set up all these. So, I mean, I'll talk about the game in just a second, but some of those things that I've read through, it looks an enjoyable game. There's some really nice touches that you guys seem to have put in. So I was interested in what you said about working with Python. So there has been this kind of dialogue back and forth and contribution. Have they said no to anything, or have they kind of just gone along with most of the things that you've wanted to kind of to do?
No, actually, we haven't had any contact with anybody except the licensing company and Terry Gilliam's daughter. I'm sorry, I don't even know her name. Brian has been in contact with her. But we actually have no idea what the Pythons think of it, and they've had no input in the creation.
Okay. What about fans as well? Have you had any comeback in terms of fans and so forth?
Yeah. Well,
oh God, here you go.
There are thousands of there's over 1,000 comments, and many of them were done by a handful of people who just can't leave it alone. Yeah,
I know. Well, that's what I meant about the I mean,
but it's a great read. It's really fun. Great creative people out there. They all could have been writers on this project.
Well, it's like I was saying a few minutes. I mean, I love my Lord of the Rings. I love my Star Wars and Star Trek and all this stuff. But even I have to say, look, people, just stand back. We don't own this. If people want to do certain things with it, then great. You still got what you want. I did wonder whether or not there would be some kind of reaction there, but. As I say, many people are going to love it, so you're going to.
I think so too.
I
think it's important too that from the very beginning we discussed how we wanted this to come about, what we wanted to look like, and we thought it was pretty important to decide that we're not going to make a comedy game or a game that's supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
Because by and large, those have not worked with a great number of people. And it's really, again, what I was saying earlier, it's not what makes us laugh is that it's funny, slapstick, obvious humor. It's that it was so strange and disconcerting, the twists and turns. So that's really the atmosphere we're going for.
Yeah.
And to the point where a party of historical reenactors will suddenly find themselves on a television program. Who cares? Why do crossbows misfire? And what are crossbows made of? And of course, just opening a door in a castle, you find yourself on the deck of a ship, and you have several things to deal with out there on the ship. And then we decided that door from that day on, it was rolled on a table.
Yeah.
That door opens out onto a ship.
Right.
But that door will always lead to the same place.
Right. Okay.
Just know that's there.
Well, you kind of led on to what I was going to talk about then in terms of the game itself. So without losing yourself too much and falling down to the rabbit hole, just give a kind of feel in terms of the mechanics and the gameplay of that. Because I mean, I've looked at it and it looks, it's authentically role playing. And again, I don't want that to sound patronising, but it gives there's a good authentic feel to it. But I'll let you explain it because you're obviously the creator.
So we're going for a rules light version, because we know that there are a good number of Python fans who are not necessarily gamers.
Yeah.
But it would be great if they thought they could get into it, and that it's not too complicated. We didn't want people constantly looking at their character sheets to figure out what to do. Really, to the opposite. We want it to be narrative driven, and to have people engaging with the other players at the table, because we're not playing this online. We're at the table with other people, and we want the storytelling to be really strong, to the point where we're asking the game master, really encouraging him in the rule book to not necessarily make people roll for every single gesture and decision, but if they describe it well, have it work.
Yeah.
And say, intercourse the dice. That's our encouragement to them. So basically, we have, of course, ripped off D&D rather heavily, in that there are characters. We're going to call them participant characters, so that PC will still be, in the nomenclature for those experienced players.
Yeah.
But and your characters will begin, pretty much. Holy Grail is a great stepping off point for this, because the historical reenactment we want to do here is based on medieval England and all those bold chaps who really made things happen and put England on the map. So it starts there, but it can, very quickly walk into a hallucination.
Yeah.
Or the studio audience will rush the scene and beat everyone up because they didn't like choices that were made there. But basically, there are several characters available, like the knight, the noble, the priest, the peasant, and you can even be a monarch if you want. You could be a king or queen. And you're not going to get castles and lands with that, but you could declare yourself a monarch, no problem.
No chance of being. There's no chance of being like a lumberjack or anything like that. Then, so that might come possibly another time.
Possibly. Just not official, but someone could set themselves up as a lumberjack. Why not? There were woodcutters in those days.
Of course.
And so each character, we're going to give them a certain number of traits instead of statistics. And what's radically different here is these traits are things like valor and nimbleness and probity and chastity. There's a long list of them, but they are things that are not fixed with the number 16. I will always have a value of 16 for this statistic. These things are going to be fluid depending on how the game goes.
Yeah. So
imagine that your knight has 4 or 5 attributes, like his valor and his nimbleness. So it starts off with each of those traits is going to have a continuum between serious and silly. And you may start off with your valor being in the middle.
Yeah.
You can roll, say, a 16-sided for your valor tests. Now, we're encouraging the game master to let things be narrative, but of course there are moments when you want to decide how badly this is going to go.
Yeah.
Or how tremendous will be the success.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay.
So there will be die rolls, because we love to put our fate in the hands of dice.
Yeah.
It's a great decider.
Yeah.
Of whether that was a good choice to make or not.
I think it was. I think it would be a good choice.
So what comes up is that if you roll a 1, fail terribly at this test, we're going to call it spamming. And your die roll on that trait goes down a notch.
Right.
And the next time you test that trait, you'll be rolling, what did I say? We're at 16, you're down to 14-sided.
Right.
If you spam another day on that same trait, then you go down to 12. And so on and so on.
Yeah.
But you don't want to get too silly, because this can, have dire consequences. And so we've created these tremendous dire consequences tables. And they're not only triggered by spamming your rolls, but they could also be triggered by too many really good rolls, which we're calling struthing.
Struth.
So if you struth on your 16-sided nimbleness roll, then you immediately roll the 18-sided.
Nice.
And should you struth that one again, well, there's going to be a dire consequence at some point.
It's a long time since I've spent a day or an evening spamming or struthing, so that sounds great.
That's right. So again, we're not going for being in the middle is kind of nice, which is actually very encouraging to be narrative, because when you start rolling the dice, it's dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. And like I say, I mean, it has the feel when I've read through it of a kind of funny game that's trying to be serious, but also as well there's room for all sorts of kind of like nuances within them. Particularly, which I was looking down the backgammon game, Fetchy Lavash, which I want that game. I want to play the rest of the game, but I've just seen the representations on the Kickstarter, and I want that so much because it looks so much fun.
Yeah. So folks who are wondering what is Fetchy Lavash, what happens is, should the French capture our dear participant characters, they will be forced into an arena that resembles a backgammon game. And you will be required, by any means necessary, to run the gauntlet from one end of the field to the other and collect a cow and carry it back, all the way back. And of course, there's an opposing team, and so there will be lots of bludgeoning and backstabbing and clubbing. Clubbing and clobbering. And what's great fun, too, is that the dice are being rolled via catapult. And so with the backgammon game that is being manufactured, we have created little dice catapults. And these could be used at any point in the game.
Right.
Just during Fetchy Lavash, which is kind of a French bastardization of go get the cow.
Go get the cow.
Fetchy is not really French, but it sounds French.
It does sound French, and I'm wondering, is there any scope for forcing in the other team's general direction, or is that,
Could be. might be helpful. Yeah, I'm sure your game master might just say, intercourse the dice. Barking in the general direction has had an effect.
Oh man, this sounds so much fun. I just can't wait. When are we thinking when are you guys thinking in terms of release? Thanks. Obviously, we're still in the Kickstarter.
I have no idea. I'm just a writer.
Leave that to other people. I mean, there's still.
There are somber rumors that it's going to be many months.
Okay.
I feel like we've created so much material that I can't believe it's going to be that long. But I suspect that it's going to be having to trim down, trim down the material to get it in to fit. Because Exalted Funeral, the editor, is going to say at some point, that's enough.
Yes, make it twice as small now. Reduce it.
No, I can't stand it.
I mean, there's still, I think, 4-5 days. It's this Friday, isn't it? Or next Friday, whichever. Coming Friday, 18th, when the Kickstarter finishes. So, we could still get a few 100,000 possibly on that. As I say, it's done so well. I mean...
There's one other thing I could just do a zoom out.
Sure, go for it.
What I was describing before. The Game Master is not called Game Master. I'm just making a shortcut for those experienced players who want to be sure of all the codes. We actually have the co-curricular reenactment program is actually something created by the BBC to teach history. And the person in charge of this branch of programming is going to be the head of light entertainment, or otherwise known by his acronym, BOL.
Yeah.
What's great is, I don't know if you've seen the GM screen, which Brian dreamed up, is the player side sees this suit, this executive suit with no head, but of course there's a head of light entertainment which fits into place, so that you know who you're dealing with. And so there's a head of light entertainment, but this person can be sacked if the players do not make choices that please the certain sensibilities of each particular head of light entertainment. There are probably 20 or 30 different personalities that they have, like Dino Vercati, put him in there. He's interested in sports.
Right.
So while the players are doing their quest, what he's interested in is anything that might have to do with competition or sports or, scoring goals or talking about his boutiques. So anytime the players are like, not really paying attention to that kind of agenda, then he could be upset and start giving, demerits, which will lead to dire consequences.
And that nicely fits into their legendary kind of run-ins with the management of the BBC and this, that, and the other in terms of their output and what they were allowed to do or not allowed to do and get away with and that sort of thing. It's almost as if you thought about all this when you were kind of putting the whole thing together.
That's right. Yeah. So we drew on a lot of characters that were in the Python shows and films, and records and books, and what has been a real blast too is to develop certain characters who were only walk-ons that had very little lines or really depth.
Yeah.
So we've been able to take some of these people and really develop them greatly, like Arthur Pewty and Deirdre.
Well, I was about to ask that very thing. Sorry to interrupt. I was about to ask that very thing because it's not as if obviously it's got the medieval aspect to it, but it's not Holy Grail, is it? It's bringing in the kind of whole Python sort of, like you say, kind of lore in terms of. Based on
exactly.
And
it's higher output.
Yeah.
And Brian also had this fantastic idea. Brian Saliba came up with the idea that, as we know, the life of Brian takes place, 600-700 years, or even 800 years before Arthurian times. But he decided to pretend that all that happened, and so that today, meaning in Arthur's time, King Arthur's time, there is a lost Roman legion wandering around the Badlands of Britain.
Right.
No one has actually been able to give them the news that the Roman Empire is no more. So there are plenty of fun things to do and interact with those guys. And also the Brianism religions of the gourd and the sandal and the shoe have actually become important religions in medieval England.
Oh, excellent. All right, okay. It all sounds very silly and it does still sound like a very naughty boy, doesn't it? So that sounds great. That sounds really cool. I genuinely, and I'm not just saying this, I genuinely can't wait to see it. Even if it does take, I don't know, months, whenever that might be. So in terms of, is it still a fluid situation in terms of the game itself with the Kickstarter, or have you pretty much got in mind, no, this is what we're going to do and everything's kind of set in stone, or could there still be additions sort of made, sort of changes?
There could be, especially with the time it takes to put things together. New ideas are coming up all the time, but we're going to try not to bog it down with too much material. But and I think, to answer your question, structurally, in my mind, things are, pretty well in place.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of refining to do and play testing to clarify and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But maybe I, don't have a clear picture of the overall, work site that we've got in front of us.
Yeah. It's still a work in progress, isn't it? I mean,
it's entirely possible.
Anything could happen. So I mean, for me, it's an exciting thing, and I think as well, once it's, I mean, the backing now is in terms of the Kickstarter, but again, once it's released as well, I think you probably find another further explosion of maybe late backers and so forth, but also as well, once it goes on release, I think I've got a feeling it will kind of just blow everybody away from what I've seen. I really do.
Well, that would be great. Our goal would really be that as many people, dig into it and play as want to, and I, my personal dream is to have films sent to me of the games, of all of them.
Well, that's what I intend to do.
Because again, we're not trying to make it funny and then package it.
Yeah.
We really want to just make a toolbox with all these characters and these strange situations and tables of weird things that can occur, that people seize it and they just run with it. That's what I would call a success.
Absolutely, and if nothing else, it keeps the Python name alive in another format, in another way to add to the films, TV, and everything else, which in my opinion is always a good thing. I don't think we've got
maybe a generation of people who don't know much or anything about Python.
Exactly.
Who have been gaming for a while.
Yeah.
And like teenagers, they may have not caught a great wave of Python. So
exactly. It's just another way of tapping into kind of bring another strand in, and if it can bring and like I said, when I teach it, when I do some of the sketches in my classes. It is sometimes a bit disheartening when very few of them have ever heard of Python, let alone these are 15, 16-year-olds. So if this can maybe change that a little bit, that's a good thing in my book. Was there anything you wanted to add about the game without being too silly now? And obviously anything else you wanted to mention because I've been interrupting you quite a lot, so I apologise. Anything else that you wanted to mention about the game itself that we haven't had a chance to talk about?
Let's see. That I can think of. I do notice that our Zoom is going to drop in about 4 minutes.
Yeah, so I think
the pro version.
Yeah.
So we can just replay, re-roll the link if we haven't finished.
Okay. Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think I've probably taken a huge amount of your time. Can I quickly talk about Rack and Veil? Would that be okay? I know the point was to talk about Python and stuff. Arthur Rackham is one of I was obsessed with his work. Many. In fact, I got a book. It was given to me when I was about 8 or 9. I don't think my parents realised the actual because it was the Brothers Grimm.
That would have a lasting impact.
Yeah, I was about 8 or 9, I think, and they said, "Oh, it's fairy tales book, Brothers Grimm," but it was the kind of watered down Brothers Grimm. So, you had the likes of I don't know. Was it Rumpelstiltskin ripping himself apart? You really, but the art was just amazing. That game, that book, and the art, and that looks fabulous. And is it so? Maybe if we can do this and maybe a follow up, is it possible to arrange a time?
Great.
Maybe in the future to talk about Rack and Veil. Would it be okay to talk about?
Sure.
Well, what I'll do is I'll message.
Most people are just hearing the title. Brian and I co-wrote a setting around the paintings of Arthur Rackham when they came into public domain, and absolutely fascinating body of work.
Oh, it is.
So creepy and yet light and with fairies, and there's a lot of positive beauty. It's there, along with the gritty and the evil, which the balance is just really splendid.
I used to go to bed thinking about these pictures, which for an 8 or 9, that's probably why I am today. But I used to go to bed dreaming about these images, which I thought were beautifully horrific, just absolutely horrible, but beautiful. So yes, let's talk about Rack and Veil maybe in the future. Listen, Craig.
We wrote this setting based on the paintings. We were taking turns looking at paintings and saying, well, who is this? And just start writing. Let's make up a story about it. And where is this? The Wapping Bridge, or this scene from a village, and created this valley called Rackham Vale with several towns and some creepy stuff going on, and some mushrooms causing people to become addicted and possibly go partially undead. And the copper mines and the river being poisoned by some strange source. And there's the questing beast. I mean, again, Arthur Rackham's body of work is so rich.
It's incredible.
There's a lot of stuff that we just didn't have time or room to put into a zine. And in fact, we kind of exploded the codes of zine. It was supposed to be, 50 or 100 pages. And we went way over delivered.
Well, if people are interested, in Rack and Veil, if you go to the Crowbar Creative website, that's where I looked at a lot of the stuff that you got there, for it. So, please let's talk about that again at some point. Listen, I've thanks very much for your time. I do appreciate completely, Craig. Thank you for.
It was a pleasure talking with
you. It's been fun, honestly. I've really enjoyed it, and I'll message you. We'll arrange a part 2. We'll talk about how the Kickstarter went, because it's still going for for
Let's do
Python,
that.
and let's talk some Rock and Veil as well, dude. All right, maybe get sort of Brian in as well, maybe next time as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be really cool. I was sorry that he couldn't make it as well, but really enjoyed it, dude. Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks a lot for your time and,
Oh,
and for sharing the news.
It's
And,
been fun.
let's
It's been
be
real
back.
fun. And let's keep Python alive, dude. Let's keep it alive. All right.
Right on.
All right.
Okay,
Take care. All right. You take care. Bye bye.